Hey, what's up you guys? It's Simon. Welcome back to my channel. So for today's video, we are going to be doing a hair tutorial that somebody requested. I cannot remember who, so if that was you, thank you. Here's the hair tutorial. This is actually the second time I am filming this video because the first time I did it, it ended up being almost an hour long, and I don't want to make you guys sit through an hour-long video of me rambling and not really making any points. So I'm going to try to make things more concise for this filming of the video. So basically what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to go through three hair types. There is straight, wavy, and kinky hair, and obviously there's more than just this, but this is the ones that I tend to draw most often and that I feel like I might be able to maybe explain to you guys. So getting straight in, haha, with the straight hair. I also want to mention a tutorial that has really helped me with drawing hair was one that Kiwi Bird did a few years ago. I will try to link it in the description if I remember. If not, please yell at me because it is very helpful. But also if you search Kiwi Bird hair tutorial, and it's here, I'll spell it because I don't know if everybody on my channel is going to know who Kiwi Bird is. So Kiwi Bird hair tutorial, very good. She's got like neon green hair on the front of it. It's great. So definitely look at her tutorial because it's going to be very helpful for the things that I make very confusing. So the first thing I always do, regardless of the hair type, is I try to find a part for the hair. I try to keep in mind sort of what hairstyle I want to do as well. So I might look on Pinterest or something and find a reference image, and once you have that, again, just look for where your part is going to be because that's going to make it the easiest possible way for you to start getting those strands started, for lack of a better term. So I'm gonna go with a side part for this illustration, and then I'm just gonna sort of start from the part and take little sort of like strokey pieces of hair, if that makes sense, obviously. But I'm just gonna sort of start making like these little strokes in the general shape of what I want it to be. So if I want something to be curvy, I'm not gonna do it like this. I'm gonna do it more, you know, like this, and it's gonna have these little shapes in there because this is what sort of gives it the illusion of, you know, multiple strands of hair without having to draw each and every individual strand of hair. And we'll get more into that when we start painting, but for sketching, just keep in mind, rather than doing super bold lines, unless you do obviously have a more line art based style, but if you're like me and you have like a little bit more of a painterly style, keep in mind just little short strokes rather than like these huge, obviously really bold lines, if that makes sense. And also if you do have a more line art style, you can also sort of do these little strokes before you get into the actual line art phase, so that it helps you. Like, I know when I do line art, I still sketch that way I can kind of make my hair in my line art look a bit, why can't I talk today, makes it look a little bit more natural, while still having like a cartoony effect, if that makes sense. So again, just sort of keep in mind your shapes, and I always start with the part because that shows me, you know, kind of where I need to be bringing the hair down, if that makes sense. That way I'm not, how many times am I going to say if that makes sense in this video? Anyway, it just helps me sort of figure out, you know, like where the hair is coming from, and I'm not having random strands of hair all over the place. So now that we're getting sort of towards the bottom edge of the hair, one thing I do want to mention, and Kiwi mentions this in their video, but it is that hair, even when it is super straight, is never going to do this, ever. Even if you have super fine hair that's like extremely straight, maybe you just straightened it with like a flat iron or something, it's never going to go straight down like this. Maybe if it's wet, it might, but in most cases, hair has weight to it, so it's always going to be moving either inward or outward in like this curve shape in some way, shape, or form. Hair is always like, if you think about it, like I don't know how to describe this. It's kind of like a piece of paper, but also not, because a piece of paper is straight. But if you think about it, maybe more like a ribbon, how it doesn't, like if you hold a ribbon up, it doesn't go straight down like this. It will kind of curve, if that makes sense. So yeah, I'm going to go ahead and curve inward for this illustration because I actually don't do that very often. So I'm going to go inward towards the back of the head, and again, it's not straight down, it's curving just a little bit. And then towards the inner, not inner, but like towards the more like jaw area, I'll always section that part off, and I will make it darker in my sketch than the rest of the illustration, because this is to sort of give the illusion that there's hair obviously on the back of the head that's going to be shadowed a little bit more, because obviously it's covered by the head and the neck and stuff like that. So I always just in my sketch will automatically make that darker so that when I reach the coloring phase it makes things easier. So I'm gonna go and finish off the rest of this hair. Alright, so here is the finished version of the straight hair, and I'm actually not going to be coloring this one just yet because I'm going to go through all three hairstyles and then do a quick coloring demo, because it's going to be pretty much the same general type of shading and such for each different style. So we're going to move on to the wavy hair, and wavy is arguably my favorite way to draw hair because I love to just make these like insane shapes. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to obviously add my part, and I'm actually going to do some bangs for this one because I snuck some onto here, but obviously I didn't do that as a tutorial, so I'm going to do a little bit of a thing about how I do bangs. So basically depending on the type of bangs that you want, you're gonna find your center. Obviously it's the same as finding a part, and then you're going to just sort of make these like curvy shapes, and even if you want a side part and not like a full front part, it's going to be the same either way, but you're generally going to make these little curved parts in the hair and bring that, you know, however far you want to. I'm going to do full front bangs, so I'm going to bring my shapes all the way around to this side of the face, and then obviously that's not quite centered. This is gonna look a little bit spidery, and then what I do towards the end to make it look less like a claw or a spider is I will sort of like do these little triangle-y bits around the bottom, and just kind of like feather it and create like these little like triangle-y line shapes so it looks more like hair and less, you know, like demon fingers like I said before. So yeah, I just kind of flick the pencil. I don't really overly think too hard when I'm doing something like this, because again, you just want it to kind of be like free flowing and not very stiff. So am I drawing on the wrong layer? Yep, that's lovely. Anyway, so I just get the general shape going, and then I'm going to get on the right layer. And the next thing that I do for wavy hair, it's very similar to straight hair. Obviously, find a tutorial, find a reference image or something, or if you're, you know, going from your mind or whatever like I am, just sort of figure out like a rough idea in your head what kind of shape that you want for the hair. And I kind of want something that's gonna go out a little bit like this because I think that would be cute. So I'm gonna start again for my part, and I'm gonna curve it, and then I'm just gonna make like these wavy shapes. I'm not really gonna think too long or too hard about it, but one thing again is I want to stress that you want to be making shapes. So again, not like crazy, you know, bold like anime shapes, but something like this here where there's like a curve, but there's also like, you're not drawing each and every individual strand of hair, but shapes themselves are good because they're going to help you when it comes to shading so that you don't have to do as much work in the future. So just kind of think about big chunks and keep in mind, you know, how hair moves and things like that, and then just kind of go a little wild and do whatever sort of shapes you want, because again, it's your art. You can do whatever you want. You don't have to follow any specific method of that, but this is just how I do it. I'm so sorry if this video is super rambly. Obviously I don't do tutorials very often, So I am doing my best. And then I'm gonna add, actually that's crazy, I'm gonna add some little flyaways and things like that. They just sort of like help make the hair look a little bit more, again, natural, because you know, obviously your hair is not like static. Or is static the word? Y'all, I'm out of it today. I hope this tutorial ends up making somewhat of sense to you. But anyway, your hair be moving, and therefore your hair is not going to be super flat. You're going to always have something that is going, you know, whatever way it wants to go. So yeah, this is the general shape, and again, I'm going to do this little you know, shading thing that I did for this side of the hair. And usually when I do wavy hair, I'll do it a little more curvy than I normally would, because again, it is wavy hair, so it's going to create a little bit of a different shape than if it were to be super straight hair. And then again, I'm just going to bring in all of these little wiggles. So yeah, there is wavy hair. I'm going to try to erase this so that you guys can see it a little better, because I made the mistake of drawing over the layer. So I hope you guys can kind of tell what's going on here. Maybe here, I'll do something like this so that it won't be as noticeable. But yeah, so again, with wavy hair, you just kind of wave it. You know, you're gonna make a lot of wavy shapes and kind of, you know, just keep in mind the general area that you want the hair to be in, and then go crazy, because it's going to come out looking a lot nicer than if you were to try and plan out every single curve. So the next one I do is kinky hair, and this one is actually really fun. So I just go into like some kind of area, so maybe the painting, and I look for like a really textured brush. So maybe something like, oh, it's alpha locked. Oopsies. Let's go on another layer. I just kind of find a brush with a texture that I like, so let me go and find one for you guys real quick. So this is a brush that I'm going to use, and it's really going to work more for like painterly type illustrations. So if you do something that's a little bit more vectorized, you might want to go for something in like the calligraphy area with like the blotchy brush. Maybe let me make that bigger. Something like that, just something with a little bit of a texture around the outside of it, so that if you do line art or something, you know, you have texture that you can follow with your lines. But I am gonna go with the oil paint brush. And then what I'm gonna do, since this already has its own, you know, natural shadow and shade, I'm just going to think less of like these individual lines and more of the, again, general shape that I want the hair to have. So you could find a part, or you could do an afro, whatever you want to do. I'm gonna do a part because I have somewhat of an idea for what I want to do for this illustration. So I'm gonna add a little part here. And then again, I'm just going to think of a shape. So I know I've seen some girls with some really pretty hair that like comes down here, and I'm just sort of creating like an outline for the general shape of the hair. This isn't an actual sketch like with these, because this is going to get covered up almost immediately, because this is sort of a combination of both the sketching and the painting. So this is definitely something that you want to do last. I'm sure there are other methods to do this, but this is just how I've been doing it as of late. So yeah, I just find, you know, again, just make the little area that I want to sketch on. And it's really hard to sketch with this oil paintbrush because it does not like to pick up color. But yeah, so I get my general shape going, and then I make my brush pretty big, and I just start making like these little circular motions. And you see there's like a texture around the outside of it, and obviously some of it is going to get, you know, covered up or erased or toned down if I feel like it's going a little too crazy, because again, with a textured brush you can't really control how much texture or lack thereof your brush has. So if you notice it looks a little bit unnatural, just, you know, tweak it. And I would recommend for something like this, if you are going to be changing the texture, to go into your eraser and change the eraser brush to whatever brush it is that you're using to illustrate it, because that way you're working with the same shape and you're not necessarily losing, you know, that line work, or not line work, but that like shape, if that makes sense. Like if I were to do this, obviously then this edge looks super, super strange, you know what I mean? But if I were to use the same oil paintbrush, so let me go to painting and oil paint. I'm using the brush, painting and then oil paint and then erase with it. You can see that like, okay, the edge still has texture now. So I'm gonna set my brush back to normal real quick because I don't think I'm gonna be using it very much. And then just, you know, keep making the shapes and try to, you know, if you're using a painter type brush, swivel the brush around a little bit to get, you know, some of that white from the canvas around the outside and create like kind of a rim lighting effect. And it's not something you have to do, it's just something that I like to do because I think it's very fun. Okay, so yeah, that's pretty much it for kinky hair. Obviously, I would tweak it a little bit more and make it more refined, but because, again, I don't want you guys to be sitting through a video that's gonna last a bajillion years, we're gonna get straight on into painting, and I'm going to paint the straight hair because it's gonna be way, way easier, especially because it's just very small. And I'm not gonna paint the whole hair. I'm just gonna show you guys pretty much how I would paint a shape or a strand, and that will make sense here in just a second. So the first thing I do is I'm gonna change my line work to something that is like a deep reddish color, and I'm gonna go all over that illustration. And then I'm gonna make another layer underneath, and I'm going to pick the color that I want for the hair. So I'm gonna say let's do blue because blue is very bright and very noticeable. And then I am going to get my base color down. So that is going to be under one of these brushes. There we go. So I'm just going to paint this chunk right here. So I'm going to cover this whole thing. And then once you have your base tone down, if you can see in some cases, you know, this red looks really, really odd against this blue. It's very bright. Or like, let's say if I were to go with this, or no, a darker color, like something like this, like obviously that looks weird. But what we're gonna do is a little trick. We're going to change that layer to multiply, and now that looks like a natural shadow in comparison to the blue without having to do any of the work of having to go crazy trying to pick your shade color. But speaking of shade colors, I'm gonna show you how to do it anyway. So the first thing you do is you take your base color, and then to get a darker tone, don't do this. Don't go straight down because you're going to end up with a color that's massively desaturated. It's kind of the equivalent of what artists mean when they say don't shade with black. They don't mean don't do this. They're not talking about shading like this, because again, shading with black is kind of like a really common thing. If you see like comic books and stuff in the line work, there's a lot of shading done with black. But when artists say don't shade with black, they're saying don't use like very dark desaturated colors, because that's essentially, I'm so bad at explaining this, but basically that's like going like this, putting black on and then having it as an overlay. So you see that it's basically you're shading with black when you do that. So what you're gonna do instead to make that look not so horrible is you're gonna take your base color and you're gonna scoot your brush, either this or your color either, oh my goodness, this way or this way. I'm gonna go towards this direction because usually when I go darker, I like to go to the right side of the color spectrum. And then you're gonna take where your hue originally was and you're gonna go to the right and then down a little bit. And then you see, well, that was a little bit dramatic. You don't want to go too far, but you do want to go over, you know, just a little bit, and then go left and down. And you'll see that this color looks a lot nicer and it shades it a lot prettier. And it also has a little bit to do with color theory, in the sense that like you're using analogous colors to shade rather than using black and white to shade. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pick my highlight. So I'm going to do the same thing, but this time I'm going to go over to the left, and not quite that far. I'm going to go over to the left, and then I'm going to go up and to the left again. And then I'm gonna have a nice highlight color. So it's kind of like a little bit of a greenish hue, and this is kind of a little bit of a purple, just to make it a little bit more visually interesting. So ignoring all of the shading I just did on the hair, because this is just to sort of illustrate what I mean about the color. So I'm gonna go turn this into, I'm just gonna erase this, I'm overthinking. So the first thing you're gonna do is you're gonna paint your base color, and then you're just gonna kind of think about where natural shadows go. So she's got her ear here, and you're gonna wanna put shadow there. And then I usually, for each chunk, I'll always put something on the edge, like the top and the bottom, and then the sides for shadows. So that's what I'm gonna do right here. I'm gonna turn this, no, I'm just gonna do the little edge control thing right here. Not really so much on the outside, but like on the inside of the hair, like right here. Right here I would do something like that, maybe not there, like here, 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 but not really towards the outer edges of the hair, because obviously that's where the light is going to be and not the shadow. So once I get those shadows placed down, I kind of will find like where I think individual strands would be, and I'm not going to paint the hair like this. I remember, you guys haven't seen this video yet, but there's going to be a video here very soon where I go through my old DeviantArt page, and I used to color hair like this, and it's a waste of time. It doesn't end up looking good in the end, and also it takes so much time. So you don't want to spend ages on something that's going to end up looking bad. So again, what you're going to do is you're going to focus on these shapes, and you see these like thin lines that I made earlier when we were sketching. You're just going to drag the color into those areas. So you're not doing each and every individual strand, but you have enough breakage in each chunk to sort of give the illusion that there is you know, individual strands there. So before I blend, I'm going to change my brush to something that has a little bit of a tooth to it, if that makes sense. Not really like a tooth, but another texture, but something that kind of looks like a brush, if that makes sense. So there's going to be these little textures at the end, and if you guys want a link to this brush pack, it is not mine, but it is very good, and I will link it in the description somehow, maybe, perhaps, if that's something you guys are interested in. I like them because they're very similar to Paint Tool Sai, and obviously since I primarily use Procreate, I'm still trying to emulate that thing on the iPad because they don't currently have an app. So I love these brushes, but I basically will just kind of drag that color back and towards the center, and I'll try and make sure that I'm getting as much of the texture from the brush visible as possible. So you can see now that the, you know, mid-tone kind of got eaten up by the shadow. So I just kind of bring in the mid-tone again, however much I see fit, and I will just kind of, you know, eyeball it and see, or again, if you're looking at a reference picture, you can see where the highlight and where the shadows land in the hair. And then 9 times out of 10 on the edges and the shadows, or edges and the shadows, on the edges in the center, I just pop some of that highlight in with a very small brush because I'm gonna blend it out here in a moment anyway. And I kind of do some like longer highlight bits around the edges just because I am a big fan of rim lighting. I think it's very cute. And then I might take like a smudge brush or something like that and push that color so that you know, it looks a little bit, a little more smoothed out and not as you know, like little strokes, you know, because you don't really want to be able to tell where your brush strokes are for stuff like this. So yeah, I just kind of smoosh it around, and then if I feel like there isn't enough shadow, this is one of the main reasons that we do this multiply layer, because it already has your darkest of darks in there. So I just steal it, and maybe there's stuff, since I use a pencil, there's stuff that's a little bit lighter than the darkest of dark. I just color drop it and throw it in there and try to, you know, bring some more shading in there. And again, I'm just eyeballing it and not really thinking too much. One thing to keep in mind is your light source. So for me, since I did this big strand, the light would probably be coming from somewhere around right here, or even up here, depending on, you know, how strong your light source is. But yeah, just try to keep your light source somewhat in mind. Okay, so this is a very rough version of how I paint hair. If you guys want a more in-depth tutorial, which I highly doubt will come out soon because it's going to take me a very long time because I am a rambler, but if that is something that you want, I will definitely do that for you guys. Just let me know and I will try my best to make that happen for you. But yeah, overall, just keep in mind the shape and your light source, and try to not shade with black so that you can have a little bit of a more interesting color scheme. I hope this was helpful. I'm sorry if this still ended up being super long even after refilming. I hope it was entertaining at the very least. I'm also sorry this couldn't be a premiere. I am currently out of town at the moment, so hopefully you guys enjoyed this video nonetheless. If you guys want to see other tutorials from me, let me know. Again, they're probably going to be really long and rambly just because it's really hard for me to think and draw at the same time still. But if this somehow helped you and you want tutorials for other types of things, be sure to let me know down below, and again, I will try and make that happen for you. Speaking of things are happening over on Patreon, and those things are wallpapers, not quite stickers, they will be coming soon. Line art, things like that. Definitely go check out the Patreon so you can get shout outs alongside awesome people like Elise, Thompson, and Duran. Thank you guys so much for continuing to support me every single month. I love you guys, and I will see y'all in the next one. Bye.